Big round of applause, please, for Third Floor, our super band made of entrepreneurs. And you should definitely stay, because we have prepared a fantastic afternoon for all of you. Hello? Hello and welcome to this enlightED stage on South Summit 2019, Day 2. How are you? Ooh, you are. You bet you are. My name is Elena, and I am thrilled to be back on this fantastic, beautiful, enlightED stage this afternoon. We have, well, I'm not going to say anything. You've read the program, and if you didn't, even better. We'll surprise you. We're going to start with our first panel, the future of learning. And the American human rights activist Malcolm X said, and I quote, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today." So I wonder, and I'm sure you do as well, how do we prepare for the future? And moreover, what is the future of learning? Well, here to discuss this subject and give us all the answers, we have an amazing panel. Their moderator is a man that has been part of Telefónica for the past 20 years, although he looks much younger than that. In 2011, his passion for technology and innovation took him alongside Telefónica's president, José María Álvarez Payete, to create WIRA, Telefónica's innovation hub. Therefore, despite being the Chief Innovation Officer of Telefónica, those who know him and love him, we always call him WIRA Man. Please, let's welcome Gonzalo Martín Villa. Gonzalo. Okay, and his panelists are coming to join him on stage. They are three, and the first guest is the founder and CEO of Babel, the top grossing language app in the world that is revolutionizing language learning. Please, let's welcome Marcus White. Marcus. His second guest was a key architect at the BBC's digital transformation for over 12 years, and since 2012, he's the CEO of Future Learn, a new online learning venture offering open online courses from leading UK and international universities. Please, let's welcome Simon Nelson. Simon, welcome. Last guest. He has dedicated his life to solving a problem he and his co-founder had in their teens, learning something new. As simple and as difficult as that. So he started Open Classrooms to open the doors to others who want to access an accessible, affordable, high-quality education. Please, let's welcome Pierre Dubuc. Bienvenue, Pierre. And now I'm going to hand it to Gonzalo. He's going to give them some, yep. No, we can't. No.
Shall I shout? Okay.
No. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Next time you present me saying that I've been working for Telefónica for more than 20 years, I'm going to kill you.
I know. We were born the same year, so.
Yeah. I look much older. Okay, thank you very much, Elena. It's a great pleasure to be here with you guys. Great pleasure to be in this panel, no? Because the title of this panel is The Future of Learning. I love that title. No? Sometimes when people ask me what we do in innovation in Telefónica, I always say the same thing. We try to invent the future of Telefónica. No? So here we're looking to invent the future of learning, no? Which is very necessary now. So this is how we're going to work. These are going to be the rules of the panel. You're going to have 5 minutes. You have the timer over there, so we're going to be very hard on that. So you're going to have 5 minutes to talk about yourself, your business, what you do. Marcus, if you want to go first.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay.
So I'm Marcus, CEO and one of the founders of Babel. Babel today is the top grossing language learning app in the world. It's a business of around 750 people, mostly in Berlin, some of them in New York. And we started this years ago, even on your scale. That was in 2007. And I'm with my co-founders was working on a music tech platform. That's what we knew. Music tech was our world. And one of my beloved co-founders came to one of our prototype meetings and said, I try to learn language on the internet, and there's nothing that helped me. And I was like, come on, let me help you, use Google. Back then we found out there was nothing on the internet that could help you learn a language, and we thought, like so many arrogant tech people, we thought, how hard can it be to solve that problem? The unfortunate answer I can give more than 12 years later is very. It was very, very hard. We were completely lacking the didactical expertise, which was absolutely critical. So the first product that we built was loved and it was famous, but you could never learn something with it, which was pretty much a problem. And we had to bring people on board who know their business. And that is the one thing for me, my personal learning and looking back, that tech solves a ton of problems. If you do machine learning and whatever, fine. But there are areas where you actually have to listen to specialists who actually know what they're doing. And the more you deal with humans, the more that seems to be the case. So talking to people who actually understand how people learn languages, for us, was the crucial step from a promising tech startup that would have gone down to a business that's now thriving and will keep on growing over the foreseeable future. And what we built with that, by bringing teachers together with engineers and product people, is, I think, what makes a ton of sense in this whole area. That is not only porting what we know of learning and education into a new medium, but reinventing it and understanding how can this specific medium, first the internet, later the app world, how can this contribute to actual learning, and how does it tie in to how people live, how they live their days, and how they want to learn. So that is, I think, the question at stake. It's not only a tech question, it's not only an AI question that will solve this for us. It is ultimately learning as a human question. And that is what we, as 4 tech founders, learned more and more, and I'm still learning that. I'm still seeing that this is one of the key problems. And what our product does is, in contrast to a lot of other language learning digital offers that you find today, is it gets you speaking. So our focus is to get you speaking in the real world, to have a real life conversation, to communicate with other people, and not understand grammar or learn vocabulary or be better at our app. That's not the idea. It's not a game. It's something that enables you to actually speak a language. And taking that seriously, for us, made all the difference in the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marcos. Your turn, Simon.
Okay, so it's delightful to be here. Lo siento, no hablo español, muy poco. I need to use Babbel, perhaps. I started FutureLearn 6 years ago. And at the time, we were entering into the world of MOOCs. So I hope many of you know that word, MOOCs, massive open online courses. And companies like Coursera, MyriadX launched into this space. And the noise at the time was that these companies would transform access to education and solve many of the world's educational ills. Now, of course, those claims were far too grand for what was happening. But so were the claims of those people who went to the other side and said, this is just a fad, a phase, a fashion. These will disappear and we don't need to worry about them. What we have found at FutureLearn and have watched other players in our market do is evolve over time and actually act as, we believe, a catalyst for very significant innovation that is now happening, finally, you might say, in higher education, around digital education. And the need for that digital transformation is only getting greater. The gap between those who would like access to high-quality education and the supply of that education is only widening. Our estimates that we have worked with Ernst & Young to develop suggest that you would have to build 14 new universities every week, serving 25,000 students if you wanted to catch up with the rise in demand by 2030. And that is simply not going to happen. In addition, you have widening skills gaps in every developed society in the world as well as developing society. Huge demand for teachers, for nurses and other healthcare workers, for digital skills, for engineers. That traditional education has not been able to serve. And when you layer on the impact that artificial intelligence and the automation of huge swathes of jobs across societies will bring, you have a massive need, an urgent need, to bring lifelong learning to people and to encourage educational establishments to now think way beyond the traditional student that they serve within their buildings. So FutureLearn and other companies like us are moving to try and bridge this gap between the supply of and demand for high-quality education. And the principles we are following are a few. We believe that the future of learning is mobile, and it still pains me that many of the services that I see trying to teach digital learning don't work on this device. We think that learning needs to be flexible, and that means that you should be able to learn while you work alongside your other activities and interests in life or responsibilities, and that the learning you do should be able to be stacked over time to build into more valuable qualifications. And therefore, the traditional degree, master's or undergraduate, is something that needs to be broken down and made more flexible for learners. And at FutureLearn, the way that we have tried to differentiate is to make our learning platform social, to encourage people to learn together and to learn from each other, not just from an instructor. And so we are now 6 years old. We've just taken a large investment to enable us to try to build on the foundations we have and work with our partners to really fulfill that early promise, to really now try and transform access to education. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Pierre?
Hi. My name is Pierre. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Open Classrooms, which is a Paris-based startup company in education. Started this company 6 years ago as a mission-driven company. Our mission is to make education accessible. And it's been like this actually since 1999, because we started before being a company. We started this project as a hobby when I was 11 years old in middle school. Started to build online courses, the courses we wish we had at school, on web development. So we built those courses, published them online for free to help some friends, and then it grew and grew, and we worked on this parallel to our studies to build this online learning community over 10 years. It became the reference platform to learn how to code in French. And then years after, finally, we graduated and decided to make it our full-time job. That's Open Classrooms. So our mission is to make education accessible, and especially professional education. Education leading to jobs, education leading to a better employability, leading to tomorrow's jobs, tomorrow's skills. So we became, as an online platform, we became an online college with degree awarding powers. So what we do is right now, we offer 50 programs leading to 50 degrees and 50 jobs. We work mostly on fields of studies like tech jobs, software development, data, science, cybersecurity, digital marketing, but also more traditional jobs impacted by technology, like human resources, management, sales, communication, finance. We cover 50 jobs. We tie degrees together with jobs through what we call a job guarantee. So it means that if you graduate from Open Classrooms, we guarantee you a job after 6 months of your graduation date, a job that is aligned to your degree, or we will refund your tuition fees. To offer that, we support and coach every student on a one-on-one basis via video conference every week. So every week, you'll have mentorship sessions with your mentor on a one-on-one basis. You'll have career coaching. We'll match you with employers. Today, we train 3 million students a month in 140 different countries. We work with employers to upskill their employees, to reskill their employees, and to help them hire their next talent. We work with 1,000 employers right now. A couple of examples, and especially on reskilling, because as Simon said, right now there's a massive displacement of jobs. So we have jobs disappearing and new jobs being created, and employers need to reduce the number of jobs on job A and increase the number of jobs on job B. So for example, we work for Amazon in their fulfillment centers with the workers literally packing orders. And as fulfillment centers at Amazon are getting more and more automated, more robots packing orders, the productivity is rising, so they need less and less workers on the floor packing orders. So what we do is that we reskill them, we make them switch careers, and they go from earning $15 an hour to becoming software engineers, data analysts, product managers to work on the actual robots that they build and double or triple their salary. So this is what we do. We work directly on the impact of technology, creating this skills gap. We reduce, on one hand, unemployment. We increase the employability of our students, and we're there to fix the talent shortage for employers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pierre. Let me open the debate asking you some questions, topics that you have touched already, but maybe we can go deeper on those. No, maybe the first question for you, but please feel free to jump in. And the first question is something that has affected me. I think one of the problems that online courses have is the dropouts, no? And it has happened to me, no? What are the key things, no, to keep students motivated, no, keep them engaged in the courses? Maybe for you, Marcos.
So there, of course, there's a couple of things that you can do and have to do. I think this equation has two sides. You try to motivate on the one hand, and you try not to frustrate on the other hand, because truth is that often people don't stop learning because they're not motivated enough, but there's a certain amount of frustration that you have with almost everything that you do, right? So language learning, for instance, is hard.
Maybe language it's different from you, because language is very frustrating, no? Because you want to use it and you realize that you're not improving enough, no?
Well, and you have to spend time, and you have to create a habit, and so on. And then you use an app, and no app in the world, not even Babel, is perfect. So you will run into problems and think, this is not working. So trying to reduce frustration and kind of the use of motivation is almost more important than cranking up motivation. Somebody once said, if you want somebody to swim across a lake who can't swim, you can offer them whatever you want. They won't swim. So you have to break it down into easy steps, and that's what we try to do to make the experience more rewarding. What we in our research found is the single most important motivator, on the other hand, is if people actually use a language in real life, if they apply skills that they've learned. It's not giving them stars or crystals or additional points or having a leaderboard, but the actual experience that, wow, I just spent whatever, an hour with this app, and I can have a very simple conversation. That is where motivation hits, and having that as often as you can is the biggest motivator that we have.
Okay. Simon, Pierre?
So in our case, we did a lot of thinking about this from the very beginning and as we were designing the platform, because one of the things that the MOOC platforms we were looking at were being strongly criticized for was dropout rates. And that's part of the reason we focused on social as our key differentiator. And we built FutureLearn effectively as a social network for learning. And the reasons for that were we wanted online learning to feel like a communal experience, like something where you were doing it with other people, and it could not replicate a classroom, but some of the feeling that you are progressing with a fellow community of people and overcoming challenges together was what we wanted to bring into the platform. And we have found that people who interact socially are 5 times more likely to complete a course than those who do not. And then every year that goes by, we gather more data about how courses have performed. And that data is down to a very granular level on which types of exercise or which types of content are more successful, where are dropouts more likely, what types of courses, what quality thresholds are at play within these courses. And we use that to go back to our academic communities and try to educate them and improve and constantly improve the quality of the courses as they go through FutureLearn. And I think that is, of course, one of the most powerful opportunities we've got, the vast access to dynamic data that we believe can significantly improve the teaching process.
Thank you so much.
So for us at Open Classrooms, the way to increase engagement and completion rates, first of all, is the mentorship. Mentorship is basically having an industry practitioner every week via video conference. A person who is hired, trained, paid, and rated by Open Classrooms. So for the next 12 months on your degree program, you'll meet your mentor 50 times and spend an hour every time via video conference. So that's the first point. The second point is the incentive of completion to get a degree and get a job. So when we have an employer committing to hire you from day one, and this is what we do through our online apprenticeship programs, our completion rates on a degree program are at 93%. So it's more than double in-person university education. So the incentive of getting a job, something that will change your life, basically, is definitely one of the critical factors in increasing the completion rate and the engagement.
Let me go, because that's very interesting. Let me go deeper on that. Maybe a question for you, Sama. Is this becoming a standard in this kind of business, like how students, the ratio of students that get a job after following those courses? Is this like a standard for the industry? This is a very important thing on your business?
Yeah, so I'd say we, like other players in our market, began very much driven by universities, and as a result, with quite a wide range of academic content. And we've been very successful in providing that and innovating around those areas. But there's no question that where the content meets employability requirements and skills gaps, the chances of, well, the popularity of those courses, the likelihood of people being committed to them is much higher. And where you can bring an employer alongside the educator in order to give meaningful outcomes and real credibility, not just academic credibility, but the credibility that means you will get a new job, or you will learn new skills for your job, or you will progress in your job, that is unquestionably one of the most powerful extensions you can give to an online course, and definitely an increasing direction of travel for ourselves, and we see this happening across the market.
Okay. One question, also a little bit personal. My best friend is a teacher. What is his future? I mean, this is the typical conversation I have in a bar with a beer with him, but maybe you can help.
I mean, I think that teacher has a very exciting future. Teachers, I'm married to one, what we've found on FutureLearn is they are some of the most motivated learners we have on the platform. Actually, I think the possibility for a teacher to develop their own skills and to innovate within the classroom, not in terms of just delivering fundamental basic learning, but in terms of supporting learning through technology and enabled by technology, and enabling then a focus on higher level skills like creativity, teamwork, etc. I think if your friend feels, I just like my job and I don't want it to change, there could be challenges. But if, like many teachers, your friend wants to innovate, wants to move forward, wants to educate, the tools that are coming at their disposal are incredible.
So you have to look at this more as an opportunity than a risk, no, for them. Marcus, you want to comment on that?
I totally agree. I've been teaching myself, and the one thing that I deeply believe about teaching that extends to what I deeply believe about life is it's about learning. So you can't possibly be a good teacher if you don't learn. And what I think what we've seen is, what we've as tech people learned is how valuable the knowledge and the skills are that teachers have, that they inherently have, and that's an old body of knowledge that has developed over hundreds of years, depending on subject, and we need those people, and we need those skills, and I think my field is languages, and that is inherently human. So you want to speak to a human, you want a human teacher at some point. And yes, we're selling an app that's a purely digital product, but there's no kidding, the best way to learn a language is from and with other people in the room. So what we do is we prepare people with the app for a real-life situation. And it's funny because over time, when we started, language schools were scared of us. They thought, oh yeah, you'll push us out of business. Today, they know that people coming to their courses started with Babbel and then said, oh yeah, I got to a point where I want to be in a classroom and where I want to work with a real teacher. And in the language field, the good news is it won't go away. In other fields, I think it's slightly different. If it comes to math and programming languages, I think digital learning is way more advanced. But so that there's digital learning solutions that do with very little teacher impact. But I think across the board, we don't have enough teachers, and we will never have enough teachers. And the skills and mindsets that these people have and bring in is what we need for future. The future of learning is not just machines. It's people.
Yeah.
For us, is really there is a real split between two different types of teachers at Open Classroom. So we currently have roughly 200 teachers and 1,200 mentors. And I would say mentors are a new type of teachers So teachers for us are there to design and build the curriculum. They are the face in the videos of the MOOCs that you see on a website. They were there to design the assessment, the projects, the exercises, the content, and they're there to lead the academic accuracy of the curricula, let's say. Mentors and coaches are there to help and drive students to go through, to motivate them, to give them best practices, to help them out every day. So it's really a one-on-one relationship they have with students. Usually mentors are industry practitioners, so they're really like in the field and they're sharing what they know of the job and what they know of their own industry. And I could definitely see the two different paths, and I would say that traditional education might be easily impacted right now by technology. And when you think about, for example, flipped classrooms on campus, it starts to be this way. You have a more theoretical part that could be done by a teacher, and then a more practical engagement and a practical pedagogy that might be project-based or group-based. And then you need a teaching assistant, a TA, who could be similar to what we call a mentor.
Okay, maybe for you also, moving a little bit, we always hear on TV and in many presentations, no, and we listen all the time that the jobs of the future, no, what my kids are going to be in the future are jobs that don't even exist, no, they're going to be very different from what we see today. Is the education system prepared for that future of the jobs, or?
So let me give you some data on that. So Gallup, the survey company in the States, ran the survey just a few years ago in the USA. They asked college leaders if they think their graduates are well prepared for the skills they will need to find a job. Are your graduates prepared to go and work right now in the job market? The answer is 96% said yes. 96% said, yes, all my graduates, they're ready for the workforce, no problem. They have the skills employers need. When they ask the recent graduates, so the graduates who are out there looking for a job or who already started a job, do you think you were well prepared and you had the skills required by your employer? What do you think they said? 14% said yes. 14 said we are well prepared. And then they asked the employers, the companies, do you think that the graduates you hire are well prepared? 12% said yes. So you see this gap, it's amazing. Like college leaders are like, yeah, we're delivering well and we're doing our job. And when you talk to the actual users, the learners, the graduates, the employers, they say no. This has to change. This has to change right now because the gap is widening. And right now it's not just about the young graduates, it's also about the existing workforce. So by 2030, you'll need to reskill 1 billion people in the workforce. At least 30% of the jobs being impacted by technology. So 1 billion people to reskill in about 10 years on the skills we need right now and on the skills that don't even exist, that will be there in the next 5 years. This needs to change right now.
Simon, do you want to comment on that?
I completely agree, as I normally do, with Pierre. And
this great guy from the UK being in favor of a French guy.
Yeah. I mean, Pierre's about 23, so he's got a bit to learn still. Okay. But I think he has a useful insight. The education sector is nowhere near ready for the scale of the challenge. I don't want to generalize too much because, of course, there are pockets of fantastic innovation that many of us know about. But it isn't getting anywhere near the scale of the challenge, the reskilling, the retraining challenge that Pierre has just mentioned. The rise in middle classes in developing countries all around the world that's creating that huge demand that I'm speaking about. And yet most, we deal in universities, adult education. I would say most universities are still 95% worried about students between the age of 18 and 25, and are teaching them in largely very traditional ways, I'm afraid. And so what about everyone over the age of 25 who is facing this unprecedented level of disruption, and where education is surely the absolutely essential first ingredient to actually get ahead of what could be very major societal problems? If you have people who are displaced from the workforce, who have no future in the traditional society, and there's going to be a lot of them. So the requirement is urgent, and it isn't just at an educational level. It's at a governmental level, where there also seems to be a gap.
I conveniently completely disagree with what you guys said. And that's not on the skills gap or higher education preparing for jobs. I think this is too late. Higher education is too late in life anyways, and it's not about skills. I think that the skill problem is something that will be solvable with businesses like yours. It's in good hands. But what about the kids? What about kids and their journey into a creative learning experience? Because what we as an employer learn, and you're probably also employers, what we learn is we don't even hire for hard skills so much anymore. What we hire for way more is this a lifelong learner? Is this a person who can, out of their own interests, has that self-efficacy to say, I'm a learner, I can learn whatever. And that is what kids need to learn at school, and schools need to be way more collaborative for that. So while I'm a huge fan of teachers, and in my life I have met very, very few bad teachers, I'm totally frustrated by the system that's built around them, what we call the education system, because that doesn't enable collaborative learning, that doesn't enable creative development. And what we need is lifelong learners. And it's not only to get them into jobs and to keep them into jobs, it's to make them citizens of the world, people who can survive in an ever faster changing environment. So I'm really worried about that. And the deepest worry is I don't see this as a problem that companies like you or us can actually solve.
Going to that, no, I'm talking about going deeper on that. I'm hearing, no, that this is about changing the system, no. Who is the like when we deal, because we've done it in the past, no. When I deal with startups, we all talk about the word ecosystem, no. Who is in charge of changing this? No, the regulators, the governments, the universities, you guys. Who has I believe it's a responsibility of all of you, no? But who are the main actors here, and who should take action on this, no? Pierre?
Tough question, but basically everybody. You have your own responsibility to increase and maintain your employability, to learn all year round. I usually tell my new hires at Open Classrooms that if they don't learn and have like proper trainings every single month, there is something wrong. because they'll be left aside at some point. So every individual needs to invest in their own training and learning journey. But then it's true that it's also employers' responsibility, it's also a governmental responsibility. So it's the responsibility of universities and vocational training providers and companies like us, which need to really make their offerings evolve and change and impact a massive scale that hasn't been done before. So I would say, first of all, is the people themselves. It's a cultural and mindset shift that we need to inject in the system.
Simon?
So we've taken the path at FutureLearn that we want to work with universities, governments, employers, rather than to try to disrupt them. So we partner very well, and we're trying to be a catalyst for the digital transformation of our partners. And sometimes that feels like the harder way to do it, but we know that if we can get those brands starting to really move forward digitally, the impact of what we can do together is so much greater than anything FutureLearn could do on its own. So, but I would just say, with some causes for more optimism, all of these companies are ones that a few years ago, many commentators would question if we would still be in existence today. And actually, all three companies have very strong progress to demonstrate in those last few years. And I think maybe we are reaching something of a tipping point where actually the platforms and the traditional sector, the system, are maybe starting to find it a bit easier to work together and make the bigger leaps that are going to be required.
Okay. Marcus?
I love the point about not trying to disrupt, but rather partner. I think that's what we all need to do in education. Partner between the companies that are there, the digital players, but also partner with the institutions that are there. Some of them are fantastically good, and some of them we have to ignite a bit the willingness to partner. And especially in my country, that's so underdeveloped. So I think the partnering part is important, and I think a lot of what we need for the future of education is what we still need to find out. The first thing is to identify what the need is and where the different needs are in primary education and secondary education and lifelong learning, and these are completely different animals.
Okay. Time's up. I fear that Elena is going to kill me if we keep on going. Not yet. Okay. Final question then for you guys. One of the things that people talk about the platforms and the business you manage is the lack of accreditation of the courses. No. How are you going to? Is that first of all? You think that's a problem? And how do you plan, if it is? How do you overcome that? No.
Sorry, the problem is what? Sorry,
the lack of accreditation of the
lack
courses?
of accreditation of courses. It is also one of the reasons at FutureLearn that we work with the universities and other accrediting bodies and organizations, and trying to enable them and try to help them find ways to deliver meaningful, credible education that meets employability requirements. So, for example, we are focusing a lot on development of micro-credentials that are larger than a short course, but sit well below a full degree, but are something meaningful that have accreditation, and can over time be stacked together to build to a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, an undergraduate degree. So we think it's very, very important. It does make life harder, but it will make our propositions stand out in the market if you can offer meaningful accreditation.
Okay.
Pretty much the same as you probably understood, where we already have degree accreditation at Open Classrooms, so we build our degree programs in partnership with accreditation bodies. We're seeking UK accreditation and US accreditation as well, because right now we have a French accreditation with European recognition. But I do think that accreditation is still a need on the market right now, for a matter of recognition in terms of the quality of the program that you deliver, but also in terms of access to public funding, because most of the grants, scholarships, tuition fees that could be covered by employers, by the government, are usually tied to accreditation, and it's a massive problem in Europe, but also in the US with Pell Grants. So I do think accreditation, although will evolve, is still a requirement for the market right now.
Okay.
For us, the accreditation is or the credit is if somebody can speak in real life, and if they can make themselves understood. And for us, when I speak from the employer side, we care less and less about credits, and we do more and more our own assessment. So hopefully that will go away. That people learn for credits rather than learn to get better at what they do.
Okay, I think we don't have time for more. Okay, so thank you very much. There was a great panel. I thought it was going to be a complicated panel because you're Germany, the UK, France, and then Spain. I thought we were going to fight, but well, we can fight on the other stage. Thank you very much for behaving, making my job easy.
Take 'em off, laptop, pick up. Ooh, but I slowly got. Hold you up, boy, you want marijuana. He got held down to his knees. Got to be a joker, he just do what he please. He got told him football, he got monkey finger issue, Coca-Cola. He said, I know you, 'cause you know me. One thing I can tell you is you got to be free. Come together right now over me.
Thank you very much. Third floor. Whilst people are coming in, please join us. There's plenty of seats at the front. Let me tell you a story. In the 1950s, a young man with permanent amnesia changed what we know about learning and memory. Henry Mollison, known as patient HM, lost the ability to form new conscious memories after undergoing brain surgery to treat his intractable epilepsy. He experienced everyday aspects of life, like eating or taking a walk, as though if it was for the first time. When he met someone new, he would forget that encounter within a few minutes. By studying him, scientists learned the complex functions, such as learning and memory, are tied to distinct biological processes and regions of the brain. Since then, neuroscience has made great advances, and we know much more about how we learn. Well, to discuss this and its implications for teaching, we have a keynote speaker who was here last year, and we are very lucky to have her back. She's an educator, a writer, an engineer with a truly unique background. She has served in the US Army, worked as a Russian translator on Soviet fishing trawlers, and met her husband, who is here, was working at the South Pole Station in Antarctica. What are the odds for that? Love is in the air. It's destiny. Her work focuses on the complex relationship between neuroscience and social behavior, and her research has been described as revolutionary in the Wall Street Journal. It is with utmost pleasure that I bring you Dr. Barbara Oakley. Barbara. Welcome back. Always. Welcome back.
I'm so glad to be here again. I get to actually share more than I got to share last year. So I will begin by introducing myself. People know that I'm from Oakland University sometimes, and they think, oh, Oakland University, that must be in Oakland, California. So she lives around palm trees, has great weather, all that kind of good stuff. Well, no. Actually, this is me going to work at my day job. I live in Oakland University, or in Oakland County, Michigan. And so it's a little cold there. But I teach this course called Learning How to Learn with Terry Sanowski. He's the Francis Crick Professor at the Salk Institute. And this is Terry going to work at his day job. So that's one of the great things about online learning, is not only can students get together from various places around the world, but also just professors themselves can come from very different backgrounds. Now, to my shock, I was invited to speak at Harvard. I was a nervous wreck because, I mean, it's Harvard. And so I walked in the room and I was even more nervous because it was packed, standing room only. And I thought, why are there so many people here? It turns out that Terry's in my one little course, made for less than $5,000 US, mostly in my basement, had on the order of the same number of students as all of Harvard's massive open online courses put together, made for millions of dollars with hundreds of people. And what this tells you is that people are starving for fresh approaches based on sound science and sound neuroscience on how we learn effectively. Now, I should give you just a little sense of where I'm coming from and how I grew up. I grew up moving all over the United States. And the problem with this is math is a very sequential subject. And if you fall off anywhere along the way, it can be hard to get back on. When I was 7 years old, I was moving from Texas to Massachusetts, and they were suddenly way far ahead of me in the multiplication tables. And, well, to tell you the truth, I didn't like math anyway. I'd never really paid much attention to it. I thought, well, I can't do this stuff. I don't have the math gene. So I just gave up when I was 7 years old, and I flunked my way through elementary, middle, and high school math and science, which is a little bit ironic, seeing as how I am now standing in front of you as a professor of engineering. So one day, though, one of my students found out about my past, and he asked me, how'd you do it? How'd you change your brain? And I thought, how did I do it? I mean, I was just this little girl, and, you know, wasn't I cute back then? That's the last cute picture of me. But I, as you can see, I loved animals. I liked knitting and weaving and all those kinds of things. And I didn't know what I could do when I grew up, except I knew it couldn't be analytical. Now, in the US at that time, there wasn't any kind of focus on or emphasis nationally on learning other languages. But I thought, I really want to learn at least one other language. I couldn't afford to go to college to do anything like that, but I found out there was one way to learn another language and actually get paid for it, and that was to join the Army. So there you see me looking super nervous. I'm about to throw a grenade, and if you knew how clumsy I actually am, you would know why I look so nervous. But I did learn another language. I learned Russian. I ended up working out on Russian trawlers up in the Bering Sea, and I just loved having new adventures and seeing the world through different perspectives. So I also ended up at the South Pole Station in Antarctica, and that's where I met my husband. So there he is. He's in the corner there 35 years later, and he's my hero. So. The thing is, though, here I was, I'd done everything that people had told me to do. I had followed my passion, and I'd followed my passion right into a little box, because I had thought of only what I wanted, not what the world was looking for. And as it turns out, we know that culture and language are always going to be important, but increasingly, analytical skills are also important. So I was 26, I was looking to get out of the military, and I thought, well, now what do I do? I remembered all these West Point engineers I'd worked with, and they had these books. I'd look at them, and they'd have these equations that looked like a foreign language. And I thought, now wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to be open to new adventures and new ways of looking at things? Why don't I see if maybe I can come up with or learn in math and science? So at age 26, I went to the university and I began with remedial high school algebra, and I slowly began working my way upwards. It was not easy. But if I'd known then what I know now about how the brain learns, I could have been so much more effective in what I was learning. So I think we should look at the brain and what's going on in the brain. We know it's enormously complicated, but we can look way down deep in the brain at the fundamental building block of the brain, and that is the neuron. There's about 100 billion of them in the brain. I just love looking at you when you see this, because you can just see your faces fall. It's like, oh my gosh. Now she gets into the heavy scientific stuff. It's going to be super boring, so let's spice it up a little bit. So here we have, this is a metaphor, and metaphors are really powerful for learning, for a neuron. And our metaphor is a space alien, and it's got 3 legs, and those legs in a regular neuron are called dendrites. And the legs have these little toes that stick out of them. It's a space alien, so it's okay. It can have lots of toes. In real life, those are called dendritic spines. And then at the top, it has this arm that reaches out, and that's called an axon. And the whole thing that neurons like to do is they love to reach their little arms out, and watch this. Boop. They like to tickle the toe of the next neuron. That's what neurons do. They kind of just reach out and at least for our purposes, and tickle toes. What they're really doing is they're sending signals along. So here you can see a signal passing along, jumping that little gap between the neurons and passing along to the next neuron. Of course, it's far more complicated, but really, for our purposes, we can just think of it as a signal traveling along. Those are your thoughts as you're thinking or as you're learning something. So in fact, well, you can see right here, it's a little bit more complicated. We've got the electrical signal traveling along, neurotransmitters, electrical signal. And the thing is, as you learn something, you are creating connections between neurons. So if you're learning a guitar chord, let's say, what you're doing is creating a set of links between neurons. Guitar chord, new vocabulary word, how to conjugate a verb in another language, maybe how to take a derivative in math. Whatever you're learning, you are simply creating links in long-term memory. So I'm showing 5 neurons connected here. In reality, it can be hundreds of connected neurons, even for a simple concept, maybe thousands of neurons. But we can conceptualize it very simply as only a few neurons. When you practice, you are strengthening the connections between those neurons. So a little practice, more connections. Practice again, more connections. Interestingly, one of the most powerful ways to build and enhance those connections is to retrieve an idea from your own brain. Don't sit there and reread or underline or make concept maps. No, if you're reading a page, for example, look away and see if you can remember and retrieve that key idea from your own brain. So the best way to strengthen something is to pull it from your own memory, and there you see how it can strengthen what you're learning. So what you're really doing when you're learning is you're creating this nice set of links between neurons. And the more you practice, see how it's richer and deeper. Those links get stronger and they connect with other neurons. So you're not just practicing one thing over and over, you're seeing how it's richly connected with many different concepts. Now, what happens though, if you here in, I don't know if students here in Spain are like those in Michigan, but I can tell you what they do in Michigan. I will sometimes, I like to think I'm a good teacher. I'll explain a concept. The students will get it, will practice with it, and I really know that they actually get this concept, even if it's a little bit hard. But then what they do is they go home. They have maybe a job that they work at. They've got 3 other classes. In fact, they don't even bother to look at their notes for 3 weeks until the next test is coming. And then they suddenly haul out their notes and they're trying to remember and what I was saying in class, which they'd understood before, and they can't. The reason they can't is because they weren't using those little dendritic connections, and so their synaptic janitors just said, oh, not using it? I'll just sweep it all away. So this is why practice can be such an invaluable aid for learning. And it's what happens when you're learning something, you've got these sort of, you've got these little dendritic spines that pop out when you're learning, and then when they really practice and that signal really goes through is when you sleep at night. And so this is why it can be valuable to not only learn during the day, you sit and learn, but right before you go to sleep, take a quick look at what you're learning. That will tell your mind, I want you to practice with those particular circuits. In fact, research by Duolingo shows that their most successful learners are those who, right before they go to sleep, they do a last little top off of these kinds of ideas. So nighttime is a valuable time for the learning process. You think you only learn when you're sitting there studying, but actually learning is taking place at other times. And we can see this happening. This is a light microscopy image of a regular living neuron before learning and before sleep. And this is the exact same neuron after learning and after sleep. And what's interesting here, if you look at all those little blue triangles, you can see that before learning and before sleep, there was no dendritic spine, or a very small one. But after learning and after sleep, a spine came out, and we don't image what it's connecting with, but it is connecting with some other neurons. So this is part of why sleep is such an important part of learning. Now, this is also why you want to space out your learning. You have a little bit every day, and what happens, let's say you have only 5 hours to learn something. It's better to do 1 hour one day, another hour the next day, and so forth. Space it out a little bit, because when you do that first hour, you go to sleep at night, strengthens that neuron. Go to sleep again at night, strengthens those neural connections, and so forth. So you're getting like double the impact, because after you're learning, you've slept that evening. If instead you cram everything in one day, it's so 5 hours crammed in one day, it's a poor structure, and you can see it's easy to sweep away. So cramming is, students often think, it's all mush up there. If I cram, it works really well, but it can be really problematic. You're not building a good structure. And a good structure is almost like building a brick wall. You layer a layer of bricks, some mortar, another layer of bricks. You let that mortar dry before the bricks go too high. But if you don't do that, you've got kind of a lousy structure, a poor foundation for learning. So learning involves many different ideas, and I want to touch on another important idea. A good metaphor for building that neural structure is just weightlifting. We know that this guy did not sit there the night before a big meet and work out, cramming and trying to do his weightlifting before the big meet. In fact, he took his time to build that muscular structure. Because we can't see into the brain, we often think, oh, no, it doesn't take any time, we can do it right away. But it's what's actually going on in the brain is quite similar to building that. Building the neural structure is analogous to building the muscular structure, and it takes time to do that. Now, there's another thing, though, that's related to what that athlete was doing, and that is that he was exercising. We have known for decades that there's something magical about exercise, that it seems to enhance our ability to learn and to remember, but no one knew why. But as it turns out, very recently, scientists have discovered why learning is enhanced by exercise. Learning produces within the brain a substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is abbreviated as BDNF. And BDNF is, if you look here, this is a dendrite before application of BDNF, which would be sort of like before you exercise. And this is after application of BDNF. Look at all these dendritic spines. They're just popping out like crazy. They're saying, come on, I'm ready to learn something. Just hook me into anything and I'll learn it for you. So this is, a lot of times we think, oh, learning is only us sitting and studying something. But we can do many things to enhance our learning. As well, we've found that not only exercise, but exercise with good nutrition, with things like, you know, eat your vegetables, cabbage family, onion family, nuts, chocolate, dark chocolate, all of things in a healthy diet without too much sugar. But I think it's easier for you here in Spain because the food is so good. So, but exercise coupled with good nutrition enhances your cognition even better than either one alone. Now, I just want to touch on two very important ideas related to your memory. And one of these is working memory. That's almost, it's like short-term memory, what you can hold temporarily in mind. So if I gave you, let's see, 74325, and I said, remember that. Can you remember that? If you can remember that, how are you doing it? Repeating it? I would be repeating it. And in fact, that's how we remember short-term a lot of information, is we just repeat it temporarily. Whereas long-term memory is more like, oh, I don't need to repeat it. I can remember my mother's name, my address. I can even remember some things I've learned in school. So where is working memory and where is long-term memory? Working memory, they used to think you could hold like 7 items in working memory. Now they think it's more like 4 items. If I haven't had my coffee yet, I can hold maybe 1 item if I'm lucky. But so you can hold 4 pieces of information roughly in your working memory. And if that you can almost think of it like a little octopus that's in your prefrontal cortex in the front of your brain, and it's got 4 arms because it can hold 4 things. So there we go, there's our little octopus here, it's got 4 arms in it. And the thing is, so that's working memory, it can hold something temporarily, but long-term memory is more like, it's scattered around your brain, but for our purposes, we'll think of it as a set of links stored in a wall locker. So we've just got these links. Those are the links we've created because we've learned something and we've practiced with it. And when you're learning anything, your working memory is just working really hard to create sets of links. Once it has created those sets of links, though, all it has to do is just reach out into long-term memory and grab those sets of links. So this brings me to our younger daughter, Rachel. So we're sitting around around the dinner table one night, and I remember asking our daughters, I need somebody to model backing up a car really badly. Our younger daughter's like, Mom, I got this. I can back up this car terribly. And indeed, she had just learned not long before to back up a car. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch little Rachel's face here as she's trying to back up the car. She's thinking, let's see, do I look in that mirror, or which mirror, or maybe behind me, or no, do I go to the front? Oh wait, no, the back. And then off she goes into the ditch. The thing is, what was happening was she had a very heavy cognitive load. Her little working memory was working very, very hard to be able to figure out what's all this information about backing up a car. She didn't have any working memory available for anything else. So she's just working, she's trying to figure things out. Indeed, the only time my father ever had an accident, he had 2 accidents in his life. I was talking to him both times. So I was distracting him, and one of those little arms of his working memory went off, and he wasn't focusing when something difficult arose. But look at Rachel backing up the car. Once she learns how to do that, it's easy. She just reaches into working memory and grabs that set of links. She has a light cognitive load, and she's got arms on her attentional octopus that are available for other thoughts, like, wait a minute, is my seatbelt fastened? What's on the radio? This kind of thing. So it's not just backing up a car that's like this, it's anything. When you are learning to take a derivative in math, for example, at first, there's all these ideas. It's really confusing. You're not really quite sure. But once you've learned how to subtract, how to divide, how to take derivatives, whatever you're learning in math, in learning a language, in learning in learning a musical instrument, whatever you're learning, once you've created those nice sets of neural links, it's easy to reach out and grab them and put them together, sometimes in very creative new ways. So here you can see working memory coming down and saying, oh, wait a minute, this professor's asking me to put this idea together with this idea, together with another idea. And they're able to do that if they have built those nice sets of neural links. So if you don't do that, what that means is you sit down at the test and your working memory is going crazy, and you think sometimes that's test anxiety, but it's not, or at least not necessarily. It may be simply that you haven't created those sets of neural links. Now, experts of all kinds, their common factor is that they have created lots and lots of neural links. Now, I do want to make just a little side comment here. So you'll notice your wonderful moderator, Helen here, Helena she comes up, she speaks to you, she talks a little bit about interesting material in a very relaxing way, and I have to tell you what she's doing, which is neuroscientifically really terrific. Your brain has 2 fundamental learning devices in it. One of them is the hippocampus. The hippocampus learns really quickly. And as she mentioned before, if you don't have a hippocampus, you can't put new memories in place. But Henry Mollison, the HM that she had referred to, he could remember things from long ago. So he had information in long-term memory, he just couldn't put new information in there. What's really going on, when you learn something, your hippocampus grabs that information, and it does it very quickly. Your neocortex, long-term memory, it's really dumb. It wants to follow along just like the hippocampus, but it's kind of too dumb to do it. I mean, you have to repeat a lot of times. So what's happening when she's giving you a little break, Your hippocampus has been taking in all this information. Your neocortex has been trying to follow, but it's been having trouble. And then you get this nice, relaxing Helena break. Here's what's happening. You're kind of paying attention, but your hippocampus is also turning around to your neocortex and going, psst, hey, remember? These are the key ideas that you've just learned. That relaxing little break that Helena gives you is also an important aspect of learning. So as I close, I would just like to allude to Santiago Ramon y Cajal, one of the most brilliant neuroscientists ever, and I think it is true when he says that persistence and flexibility are the keys to learning, and change is possible for all of us. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Come with me here. Thank you. Well, don't go. I was going to say, after all these aliens and octopus you were talking about, the brain will never be seen by us the same way ever again. And if there are any students in the room, remember, all that time you've been wasting before the exams, don't bother. Just stay in bed a bit longer. Thank you to Dr. Barbara Oakley. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna find a mark. A 7 nation army couldn't hold me back. They're gonna rip it up. Lay on dead bottom, rock me on my back. And I'm talking to myself all night because I can't forget. I've been going through my mind and got a cigarette. And a pressure over your mind says leave me alone. Oh, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Oh, leave me alone.
All right? Okay? Whilst you're fixing the ideas that Dr. Barbara Oakley just gave us, I'm going to speak to your hippocampus, or your hyperbrain, or I'm just going to talk to the other side of your brain that is actually not listening to me, but just relaxing, okay? And I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question. Did you know that there is a critical period to learn a language? Somebody's saying, yes, I'm too late. Well, we're never too late, but babies and children are geniuses until they turn 7. And then there is a systematic decline. After puberty, we are basically doomed. Our next keynote speaker is a neuroscientist. She's internationally recognized for her research on early language and brain development and studies that show how young children learn. Her work has played a major role in demonstrating how early exposure to language alters the brain. She is Bezos Family Foundation Endowed Chair, co-director of the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington, and an expert in bilingual brain development. Please, let's welcome Dr. Patricia Kuhl. Patricia, welcome.
Hello, Elena. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am a neuroscientist, very, very interested in how humans learn, particularly children, from infancy to adolescence. Modern neuroscience now lets us look inside the human brain as a child or an adult learns. And what we are learning from those studies is going to revolutionize education in the next decade. Language is a great example. 21st century children should be learning a second language. Maybe they should be learning multiple languages. And so there are many, many benefits to learning second languages, to being multilingual. But when is the best time to learn a second language? Well, this slide shows you what the neuroscience studies is telling us. The infants and young children are geniuses to the age of 7, and then every 2 years after the age of 7, it becomes more difficult. After puberty, it becomes very, very difficult. It doesn't mean that you can't learn. It takes longer. It's much more difficult. You don't use the same brain machinery that you used when you were a young child. We can now see this in the brain. Essentially, there's a trade-off between that open mind and that ready to learn baby brain, and the brains of puberty and beyond people who are dedicated and experts at particular things. So what happens in early development is that you're ready to map the information that you experience, and the growth of networks in the brain are experience-driven. Once those networks are formed, it becomes much harder to learn. And as adults, we have the beauty of expertise, but not the openness that we had as young children. A utopia of learning would be if we could combine the expertise of adulthood with the open mind of the child. And that's a problem that philosophers discuss all the time. So what is it that makes the babies so good? Part of it has to do with their growing brains. If you look at this slide, which shows the size of the human brain from birth to adulthood, you see that by age 5, the brain is 92% of its total size. It's growing in that first 5 years more rapidly than it will ever grow again. What's making that brain so big? It's the growing of connections. If you look at the left panel, at birth there are 86 billion neurons in the baby brain, but they're not connected to one another. And so by age 3, the connections are rampant. At 1 million a second, the neurons are growing connections so that they can, like telephone wires, so they can talk to one another. And then a massive pruning takes place because by puberty, we are using only the synapses that we have used in our early development. And so the ones that are not necessary are pruned. Pruning produces that expertise. You focus. That brain focuses on the networks that have been developed. So again, we get this trade-off. Early in development, that system is ready to learn anything. A 3-year-old can learn anything. By the time you're an adult, you have 86 trillion synapses, but they're dedicated to the things that you have learned. Another way that we can look at the brain with our modern technology is to look at the long-range connections that are growing in the brain based on experience. What we see here is one child at 7 months, at 11 months, and at 26 months. And we're measuring myelin in the brain. Myelin is the substance that covers the neurons so that the information can speed rapidly from one place in the brain to another. So you see the 7-monther has already some myelin growth, but it's not yet yellow. Yellow is the fastest, the most myelin. And at 11 months, it's growing, but by 26 months. So the next time you look at a 2-year-old and you talk to a 2-year-old, just think about the network that's going on in that child's brain. It's extraordinary. So all this brain science is telling us that human learning in that early period is marvelous. So how is the baby brain using this brain, her brain, his brain, to learn a language? We did tests over the past 20 years in many countries. I had laboratories set up in 8 or 9 different countries, in Asia, in Russia, in most of Europe, in South America. And we were asking questions about how the infants are learning and when they're learning. We used tests on babies' abilities to hear the distinctions between sounds. They have to hear the sounds that represent consonants and vowels in order to distinguish words. They can't learn words until we can know that they discriminate the sounds. So I'm describing in the next movie the way we test infants. You'll see a little 6-monther sitting on mom's lap and listening to a sound, ah, ah. The babies learn that when the sound changes from ah to anything else, the baby has 3 seconds to turn their head to see a dancing toy in a box. Here's what it looks like.
Can a baby as young as 6 months old hear the difference between two vowels? This baby is trained to look for the toy when the sound changes. She's being distracted, so she'll turn only when she hears the difference in sounds. The key question, will she turn before the toy lights up?
E, 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 E.
That baby is a genius, and she knows it. So when we did these tests all over the world with the sounds of all languages, what we discovered is that babies at 6 months of age are citizens of the world, meaning they can discriminate the sounds used in all of the words, in all of the languages in the world. It's amazing because the parents sitting behind those children can't do that. The parents sitting behind the children are language bound. They can hear the distinctions only for the languages they were exposed to in the first 7 years. So when do these little citizens of the world change into adults who are language bound? Before their first birthdays. This is the result in one country. We were in Tokyo, where the little babies are learning Japanese, and in America, in Seattle, where they're learning English. And we're using a contrast, ra, 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 changing to la, that is important to English but not to Japanese. And what we saw is that at 6 months of age, all the babies in both countries do perfectly well, well above chance, about 65%. They turn their heads at the right time when the sound changes. But 2 months later, something amazing happens. The babies listening to their native sounds, the Americans, are getting better. The Japanese babies are getting much worse, and all of them are preparing to learn words. They're doing exactly what they have to do in order to learn the words of the language. When we tested in Beijing with Mandarin sounds, the Chinese learning babies are zooming up and the American babies going down. When we tested in Spain and when we tested in France, wherever you test, this same phenomenon is going on. Between 8 months and 10 months, the baby brain is changing to master the sounds that they're hearing us speak and giving a loss of their ability to hear the distinctions of foreign languages. This is that pruning process going on. The equipotentiality that they had early in development is now leaving. So we see that there's a sensitive period in development. During this 2-month period, something's happening in the baby brain. They're responding to listening to us speak. So I wanted to ask a question. What happens if we expose babies during this sensitive period to a brand new language for the first time? So we tried this with Spanish and we tried this with Mandarin Chinese, and the kids had only 12 sessions, each 20 minutes, to listen to a play session in which an adult is speaking in that foreign language. And here is what those sessions look like. This is the bottom line of that experiment. The social brain gates human learning, but here's how we discovered that.
Jasper， 早安 Finn， 嗨，我们要来讲一个故事哦。今天要讲的故事是《小熊七七探险记》，来看看发生了什么事情哦。小熊七七在这里，一个绿色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，转一下，转一圈。嘿，一圈，再一次哦，转1、2、3。
Okay, so how's your Mandarin coming along? The babies in this experiment learned so well, they were exactly equal to the kids in Beijing or Taiwan. 5 hours of exposure was enough to have them learn the sounds and the words that they'd heard from this foreign language. We then ran this experiment because the learning was so exciting. We wanted to know, can they learn via a video? So we brought in new babies. They had the same exposure in the same room for the same amount of time. And it looked as though they were learning, but our tests, brain and behavior afterwards, show there was no learning whatsoever. The babies in the live exposure learned perfectly. The babies in the TV condition, the video, learned nothing at all. They were equivalent to the control group who'd learned nothing because they were only exposed to English. It was the control group. What's going on in the brain? Why is this social so important? We have a $2.5 million machine that helps us answer that question. We're the first in the world to put babies in this machine because it's perfectly safe and non-invasive. We can see a movie of the activity in the brain as the baby is learning. So when we expose the baby to a live speaker as opposed to a television set, what we see is there's a network in the brain that connects auditory areas to social areas to the motor areas that the baby uses to talk back. When you speak to a young child, you're activating the circuitry that allows them to speak back. So, when you know all of this about the brain and how learning occurs for languages, and you believe in bilingualism, what do? You buy an airplane ticket and go to Madrid. Why do we go to Madrid? Because Madrid has a genius solution to infant education, and that is the neighborhood schools. In 2015, we were here in 4 schools with my new bilingual, brain-based program for learning a second language. In 2018-19, we were in 13 schools with 800 children. We're running randomized control experiments where half of the children get the intervention method that was invented based on the research, and the other half get the Madrid community practice for bilingual learning in these schools. Not as intense, but the kids are getting some exposure to nursery rhymes and to book reading and some vocabulary learning. But our intervention is very, very intense. For 1 hour a day, the children are interacting with each other and with the teachers in group activities and games and playful things. The curriculum is very language-based but play-based, both in groups, in small groups, and one-on-one. The kids are getting the experience talking. We get them to talk because the brain science shows us that listening to speech activates these motor centers. The data from 2015 were amazing. Standardized tests said that Spanish grew at the same level, but English in the red group at all 4 ages that we were working, the children's production of English is 5 to 10 times more than in the control group. These kids are speaking in words, phrases, and sentences after 18 weeks of exposure. Now, understanding how well this learning occurs and realizing it has to be face-to-face learning, we knew we couldn't scale up without going to software. We had, for the 2015 experiment, trained all the tutors in person. But then we created software that does the training for us. It has 2 to 3 weeks of intense training via software only, not face-to-face, on the principles of the method and the 32-week curriculum. And I'm here to tell you today that the 2018-2019 data are phenomenal. We replicate with the 32 tutors trained with the sparkling software. We get the same result. And in fact, we're most excited about this graphic because several of the 13 schools we worked in this year were the poorest in Madrid's neighborhood, the poorest neighborhoods in the Madrid system. These children have parents who cannot read. When the parents came in and had to sign the human subject forms, they had to make an X after the directors explained what the experiments are about. So these children are children who had never been read to in their entire lives. Did they learn? Look at the data. They look amazing after 18 weeks of intervention. And I just heard this morning that the 32-week data, the kids who were exposed for 32 weeks, doubled their productions. These are English utterances produced per child per hour. They're really, really talking. So the bottom line is, here's our Madrid graduates, some of our graduates who were celebrated with their brain t-shirts and their mortarboard hats. All children around the entire world can learn a second language and probably multiple languages if they're taught at the right time using the right method. I think we can too as adults. Some of the secrets are there in the baby data. This social exposure, the social immersion, the social brain is the gateway to learning, even in adulthood. I often say to my students, if you're over 30, if you're over 50 and you want to learn a second language, perhaps you should fall in love with someone who speaks that language so that the social brain would be totally engaged. Of course, I have to be careful with that recommendation because my husband's in the audience. We think that there may someday be a software. This is an experimental question. Can there be a software, a robot? Can there be something social enough to turn on the social brain in humans, because that's what has to happen for learning to occur. Maybe yes, maybe no. The experiments will show us. But the social brain is the gateway to learning. The babies are showing us how that works, and those principles might allow all of us to learn throughout our entire lives. And perhaps Madrid will lead the way. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to ask Patricia to join us on the second chair from the band. I'm going to ask Patricia to stay with us because she's going to join our next panel, and the last one of this afternoon, which is language learning and technology. It's about language learning. And I'm going to take over from what you said, Patricia, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I can remember when there were only two ways to learn a language. One, to pore over textbooks and bulky dictionaries in trying to memorize, as Dr. Barbara Oakley was telling us sometimes how useless it is. And the other one is to marry a foreigner, right? And I did the latter. I married an Englishman who's also in the audience to end up teaching him Spanish, hence my appalling English. Sorry for that. After all, as the Turkish proverb goes, dil dile dehmeden dil ogrenilmes. Are there any Turkish speakers in the audience? Any Turkish speakers? One. Oh my God. My pronunciation was worse than my English, so I'm going to try to translate, and you tell me if it's right. A language cannot be learned without touching tongues. Yes? Yes! Thumbs up! Well, you know, I spoke Japanese yesterday, Turkish today, who knows tomorrow. Today, learning a language, a foreign language, has never been easier. Technology has revolutionized the whole process. Although, I think you can still marry a foreigner, but just do it for love. To tell us more, we have prepared a fantastic panel, the last panel for this afternoon. And to moderate it, we have with us Ricardo Mesquita. He's the head of immersive learning at IE Exponential Learning. He's an entrepreneur, mentor, and advisor for early-stage startups and passionate about education and technology. His panel is formed by Bernard Niesner, CEO of Busu, Cristobal Biedma, CEO of Lingo Kids, and Richard Vaughan. He's the founder and chairman of Vaughan Systems. Let's welcome them all. Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Love the talk. It's beautiful. All right, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. We're the last panel on the afternoon. I had the pleasure of having a glass of wine with Patricia the other day, and there was an impressive conversation. And so learning a second language is a labor of love, and it's good for you. It's cognitively speaking, especially not only at an early age, right? So we have a wonderful panel with us, and I just wanted to throw out there, how are we with learning a language today? Is it, mixing more traditional education, but also with technology? Where do we stand today? Are people looking for it? Is it a personal endeavor? Is it a professional search? Anyone?
Well, it depends on the age. And the age for Pat, well, of course, she starts with people at age 7 months, or even before, perhaps. I usually start with people who are 35 years old who say, please, endow me with the English language cheaply and quickly. It's like, may the English language descend upon you and remain with you, amen. And it doesn't work that way. So for adults, the approach, of course, is approach that requires bringing out the motivation in the student, because it's hard work. It's not painless. And so my approach is going through the heart and getting the student to fall in love with English if possible. And to do that, he has to fall in love with me first. If he falls in love with the teacher, if the teacher's cool, the subject is cool. Even if it's algebra or Lope de Vega or Shakespeare. And so that's my job, much different than little children. But adults need to learn second languages as well. How many?
I know Bernard for quite some time now, and I know the the evolution of Buzua, and I was impressed. We were looking at it last night. I mean, I remember the original versions, and it has gone a long way, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are people looking into? Because it's mobile first, people are looking into your app. So what are the interests, what triggers their interest in a second language, and how do they progress?
Yeah, so we as Buzua, we have now around 100 million users from over 190 different countries. And the interests and reasons why people learn a language really differ also per country and per age group. The thing is that, especially in emerging markets, learning a language is not a hobby, it's the route to success. Because especially to learn English, it helps you to just improve your career. But in other markets, we see a lot of our users learning because they improve their studies, they're young professionals to again improve their careers. And then once they become like 40 or 50, then it's really more about, I think, travel reasons, culture, etc. So there are several different reasons to learn a language, but we try to help all of them.
Right. And Chris is the founder, CDO of Lingo Kids, and your age group is between 2 and 8?
Between 2 to 8 years old.
Right. So the parents' supervision or presence is also there somehow. How do you engage children in learning at that stage?
I mean, it has to be a very playful experience, right? So children, if you go to kindergarten, and I'm sure Kat has seen this a lot of times, it's all about play. So it has to be something fun. I suppose some parents think there has to be some kind of like, like drilling, like vocabulary and so on. And to us, it's more like exposure and like letting the child drive the experience. So we create between games, interactive content, songs, audiobooks, a variety of formats, and we let the child drive the experience. On top of that, we try to engage parents. We actually kind of like rename the phrase of like screen time. A lot of people are afraid of screen time, of course, especially with children. The way we take about it is like it has to be more like a bonding experience. So it's a good time for the parents to get with the children, the same way that you are engaging sometimes with your couple when watching a movie, right? So we also provide content for parents and try to like involve them in a non-judgmental way, trying to welcome families to be part of the amazing journey of learning for kids.
Right. Pat, I was looking at your presentation also. How do you manage technology in the learning of a second language? Because do you give at early age lots of exposure? Should you, measure? How do you play that?
Well, I think technology has this role to play. So we could see in the experiments that babies were not learning from a flat TV screen, not interactive. Of course, we have many experiments underway right now looking at more interactive technologies. We see that learning increases when you allow the baby to touch the screen, for example. And learning increases even more if two babies are learning together. If one baby learns alone by touching the screen, the brain responses nudge up a little bit. But when you put a second baby alongside the first baby, it's not as though they're teaching each other. It's the excitement of having a second baby present. And in fact, the more novel the new baby, the more they learn. So this gets back to the social brain and the excitatory nature of learning. We learn best when we're excited, when we're motivated, when we feel like we can't stop. We just want to do that. Exactly.
That's what I try to do with adults as well. What I try to do with adults, just like the two little children, the social, the emotional aspect of learning. If you can touch on the emotional fiber, you're halfway there.
I think that's true. And so we leave it to the tech gurus, the geniuses in the technology world, to tell us where the technology can go. Where can it go? I think we're curious. Not that I want to substitute technologies, a very social robot for a person, because I think that young children need to be bathed in human interaction. This is how the brain gets wired. This is how the brain turns on. But if kids were learning in a social setting and then had additional practice through engaging technology, that could be the sweet spot for learning.
So collaboration, even at that young age, peer-to-peer makes a difference because it's playful, right?
It's playful.
Bernard, Chris, are you embedding this in your?
Well, I'm so glad that your research has proven that, because social is at heart of Buzua. So we define ourselves as a social network for language learning. So you don't only learn with the courses that we develop, but you also learn from other native speakers. So you send off exercises, and then you get a correction from a native speaker on your exercises. And the same way also you can help someone else to learn your own native language. And actually we discovered that if people are engaging in our social community features, they're 5 times more likely to actually finish the course than if they just learn by themselves. And I think there's an element of teaching others and stepping out from the student role into the tutor role. Yes. Because with language learning, it's all about making mistakes. You need to make mistakes in order to progress. And if you see other people making mistakes in your own native language and you can actually help them, you gain a bit more confidence and you gain more motivation, and then you proceed also in your own learning progress.
Right. Yes, makes sense.
In our case, we've seen something similar, right? Like when parents are also engaged in the education of the children, we double retention rates and engagement between the children as well. Some parents only let the children write the experience by themselves, and that's not as engaging. So yeah.
I'm curious, Richard. When I knew that you were going to join us, and you're American, but you've been in Spain for more than 40 years. How do you see the evolution of learning, and mainly focusing in English? How do you see the evolution of English learning in Spain?
It's a lot better now than 20 years ago. I would say I've been here since 1974 permanently, and up to perhaps the year 2000, I didn't see very much progress in the school system. However, the government of the Community of Madrid started what is called bilingual schools, colegios bilingües, in the Escuela Pública and the Concertada. And even though I didn't agree, and I still don't agree exactly with how they do it, it's so much better than what was before, that yes, now when young people finish secondary school, finish the baccalaureate at age 18, they're not afraid of English. They take it like a friend. English is a friend. Even though they still make mistakes, they still don't understand 100%. They're so much better than before. Then I have to support the effort that has been made by the governments here with language. Although I would do it a different way. I think I could do it better, but they've done it very well. They've done it well.
And there's a lot of content that in the past was all dubbed, and now you get original versions, subtitled, so you get a lot of much more access to especially to the English language, no?
See, one thing, this is this group, here we're talking about technology in business and in education. However, I think most of the achievements that we see in the public school and private school systems here for English have been through what they call conversational assistants, people who came from the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, and they spent up to 10 hours a week talking at the children, more than talking to. And just that exposure, which is low tech, human tech, has been very, very important in the achievement of these goals.
I would also say there's a bit of a shift in attitudes in Spain towards foreign languages. When I came to Spain in 2007, it was like, estamos en España, hay que hablar español, no? And I think nowadays it's actually quite different. Also, to a certain extent, I think with the financial crisis that hit Spain really hard, people understood that they also cannot just rely on the Spanish market, that they had to be much more international, that they had to go and export abroad. And I think nowadays you hear much more English in Madrid and in other cities in Spain. There's only one thing I still don't understand, that it's in Spain kind of common to pronounce English words the Spanish way. Like even the taxi driver this morning, he was saying, what's that, sus summit? No? So to say South Summit, it's still, you need a bit to overcome this hurdle to pronounce it properly.
Right. Well, the younger generation doesn't suffer very much in Spain. What is called in Spanish the sense of the ridiculous, feeling like a fool when you speak a second language. Exactly. The younger generation, the post-millennials especially, don't suffer this very much, or is much less than before.
I think that worldwide, the benefits of bilingualism, and it's not just English, it's any two languages or multiple languages. The benefits are economic. The jobs are there more frequently for people who speak multiple languages. The social exposure to more people and more cultures. The cognitive benefits, not that you become smarter, but the research has shown from the earliest ages, at 11 months up to adulthood, you can show that people who are bilingual are more cognitively flexible, meaning that if you give them a new problem that they've never had before, they are quicker to invent a solution to that problem. Whereas monolinguals tend to go back to the old way they did it And even if it's not successful, they persist. So there's a cognitive flexibility produced by the brain's learning of multiple languages. And then the last one is the health benefits. You will not cognitively age as rapidly if you're bilingual or multilingual. You will not have Alzheimer's as frequently if you're bilingual or multilingual. So I think people around the world, although America is going to be last at this, the US has still not got the idea that bilingualism is the way of the future. Most of the world speaks one or more, two or more languages, and there are these benefits, so why not?
And I see like Spanish is becoming a much more spoken language in the US than it was in the past, right? So we should never stop learning. So I myself, I speak 4 languages. I picked English at a young age, so I was exposed. It's not my native language, but I was able to pick a couple of, I speak Spanish fairly enough, and I picked it later in life. So my question, and most of the audience is older, so how do you, at what point can you expect to actually pick up a new language at any given point in time? What do you say, how can you approach that?
I think the science says that you can learn at any age. It's just how difficult is it going to be? How many hours will you have to spend? And what's your expertise level going to be? We've been doing some studies with college-age students at the University of Washington who come in from China. They're between 19 and 25, so they're young adults. And they immediately go into social immersion for English so that they can handle their classes. So we started studying them, brain imaging them every single day that they're in the social English exposure. We can actually see the growth of white matter tracts in the brain. Every day those white matter tracts get stronger over the 5 weeks of the immersion program. However, if you keep imaging as the program ends, and then every day that they're not in exposure, the white matter tracts get weaker again. Right? They're not babies, right? If you're a baby, that exposure lasts. If you're an adult, you really have to keep at it or it will start to shrink back.
I remember, I have a case, about 3 years ago I was in Manhattan on vacation, and I stopped at one of the corners where a man was selling hot dogs. And he had an accent that sounded Mediterranean. And I said, well, you speak English well. He said, I would like a hot dog. Where are you from? He said, I am from Greece. Very good, but your English is not bad. How did you learn English? Selling hot dogs. And only in 8 months, he had been in Manhattan for only 8 months, coming from Greece. But because he needed English to sell hot dogs, it's motivation. And motivation can become from emotion or from need. And see, so it's interesting.
Yeah, and also the goal he was having, probably he was not so concerned about like making the perfect English, a grammatical perfect, like just communications. He just wanted to talk and get understood.
Well,
and that's something sometimes we get very lost about.
Yes.
Languages exist as vehicles for other purposes. Only the poets study language for language's sake. So it's a vehicle for other objectives.
And the Spaniards.
Yeah,
the Spaniards as well. We do.
Because I know many people who are successful in their job abroad with broken English, and so you don't need if you go to the United Nations or to Brussels, you'll hear all kinds of accents and all kinds of mistakes, but they are successfully performing their functions as well as me in my own language.
So we have now over 4 billion data points from our users of where we can study and improve our systems of how to most effectively learn a language. And there's a few things we have identified. Number one, don't cram in language learning. So don't learn just one time a week for several hours because you will not succeed. It's much more effective if you learn 3 times a week for 10 to 15 minutes every time you learn. Those users are much more successful. Number two, make mistakes. A lot of mistakes go out there. Don't be afraid. We see those users who dare, who expose themselves, they will progress much further. And then number three, also socially engage. Interact with other users, or at best, if you can afford to, travel in the country, fully immerse yourself, then you will accelerate your language learning.
I mean, how old the average age of your users?
Again, depends on the market, but I'd say in emerging markets, it's more between 18 and 25, and in more developed markets, it's that age group plus 40 plus.
routines. Okay. And those could be what Richard is saying, out of need or professional need perhaps that you need to develop. How do you see technology, I mean, as we go, and we're running out of time, as we go into language learning, how do you see technology playing a role? I'm asking this because I'm looking at startups or scale-ups like Babel that want to translate the internet, are making it more available content in your own language. So the incentive to actually learn, continuous learning a new language through technology, how do you see that playing?
Well, personally, I don't think the need to learn a language is going to go away, even though we might have AI and can do real-life translation. There's absolutely no way that in a few years, even if technically it's impossible, I would be sitting here talking in German, and you would be listening it in English in your earbud. I mean, I don't think this is going to happen, because language learning is so much more than translating your own words in another language. It's about connecting with other people, learning about other cultures, understanding other worlds, and has a lot of brain benefits as well. So I think technology enables us to learn much more about how to learn a language. We now understand much more about vocabulary retention. We have started to use artificial intelligence to actually have an intelligent vocabulary trainer where we can surface the right vocab at the right time. So language learning for thousands of years had been this kind of black box where no one really knew exactly how to learn a language. Now finally, with a lot of those online players who gather a lot of data, and we work with universities as well in terms of research, we now can shine a light in this black box and really understand what is the most effective way to learn language.
I mean, my take depends a lot in the time frame you're talking about, right? I mean, ultimately, I think it's doomed. Like language learning is doomed, right? Because either we're going to have technology that actually translates everything real time.
Language learning is doomed.
Yeah, as a subject, as a business as well, right?
Okay.
It's like, that's my take. Again, it depends on the time frame you're talking about, right?
Okay.
Either technology is going to solve that, or, I mean, we are learning more and more, like everybody is concentrated in the number of languages we are speaking, right? Like 5,000 years ago, there were more languages than today, and so on. So to me, again, it's like thinking about why do you want to learn a language? And again, it's not so much about learning the language itself, it's about like communication and communicating with somebody. So while, for example, in our case, we are helping kids learn English, our goal is not really learn English. Our goal is to create equal opportunities for children. And so we're using English as a medium to teach other things that we think are going to be true no matter what time frame you're thinking about. Like empathy, like critical thinking, and this type of skills, like 21st century skills people is talking about.
So foster empathy, foster curiosity, and the flexibility, cognitively speaking, to continuous learning, right? We're running out of time, as I said, so one last thought for the audience. If you want to learn second, third, fourth, whatever language you want to learn, what would be the first thing you would do, all right? I mean, move to another country?
I move to another country, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the best way. I learned English in Sweden, by the way.
You cannot say download Buzu.
I've met a lot of people
girlfriend
here.
or boyfriend in that language.
So love.
Yeah, love.
Immersive, moving to another country, and could it happen in a shorter period of time, or would you actually need to make a life there? Could you go there for 6? What do you envision that? Like a summer internship could work? On age?
Depending on age.
Depends on the language.
Like a 7 months old, maybe it's just like a month, right?
I think exposure, when you're very, very young, it sticks. It stays, it sticks. It's very, very potent. But even a summer, as a high school student, spending a summer in another country does amazing things to the brain, because it's still, we're neurally plastic all our lives. It's a matter of degree and the situations in which we live. The social context, as the chairman of Telefónica said, that the future is about the social context of learning. And I think that we're understanding much more how brains are driven to learn. There's a limitless desire to learn at all ages. None of us want to stand still. And for our children, the parents at Madrid were so excited about getting their babies in the experiment. In fact, parents were refusing to join the control group. So we had to flip the experiment mid-year. So experimentals were experimental for the first year, got the intervention, first half of the year, and then flipped. So there is a drive amongst all of us, and particularly parents for their children. It is the wave of the future. It's what we should allow people to do by taking everything we know about the brain and learning and making it available to people of all ages, but particularly the children.
Thank you, Pat. Richard?
Well, going abroad is a very, very good solution, but it's not within the reach of the majority of the people. So we have to find, I've met many people who have solved the English problem living here in Spain without going abroad. But the learning experience, be it languages or anything, the brain performs the learning. But if you can capture the heart, the brain, you'll change the trajectory of the learning curve dramatically. So if you can get the student's heart, you've got all the rest. And technology does not achieve that yet. We have to inject into technology the human, the social, and the emotional questions so that it captures the person and the person falls in love with the area of knowledge that they want to learn.
Right.
And technology still has a ways to go in that.
Right. Guys, we're out of time. Richard, Chris, Bernard, Pat, thank you so much for being here. I invite the audience to go out there and learn a second language. Thank you.
Ricardo. Wait, if you allow me, because this was the last panel of this afternoon, and before you leave and everybody rushes out to have a beer, I just want to thank the audience for being here. Remind you that I'll be waiting for you tomorrow at 9:30. Now you can disconnect your brain, enjoy Madrid, enjoy your evening, and I'm just going to leave with one sentence from this panel, Ricardo, if you allow me, which is what Dr. Patricia Kuhl said: bilingualism is the way to the future, even if you have to sell hot dogs. Thank you to Richard Vaughan, Cristobal Viedma, Bernard Niesnek, Dr. Patricia Kuhl, and Ricardo Mesquita. See you tomorrow. I leave you with third floor. Thank you.